So we're talking episode 5, chapter 5 of HBO's Perry Mason, where we say goodbye to one of our favorite characters. We finally meet Linda and Teddy in person, and the moment that all of you Perry Mason fans have been waiting for has finally happened. We're talking about that and much more. While Mason and Della run a solemn errand up north, Strickland tracks down the sergeant initially assigned to the Dodson case. Before returning to LA, Mason drops in on his ex-wife Linda and son Teddy, hoping to make amends for his recent shortcomings. Della sets out to find Mrs. Dodson more capable legal representation. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to Movie Files. Elliot back with my weekly recap, breakdown review of Chapter 5 of Perry Mason on HBO. Very excited to break down this latest episode. It's continuing that momentum from the last previous episodes that I've really been enjoying. Very excited to talk about this spoiler discussion, so if you haven't seen Chapter 5, go check it out, come back and join the conversation. Before we dive into this review, as you can see on the screen now, make sure you're following me on all my social media accounts. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of my new content. Give this video a thumbs up, helps out the channel, but also really appreciate it. And last but not least, again, if and when you've seen Chapter 5 of Perry Mason, let me know what you all thought about the beginning of the episode with EB and how things wrap up within the last 10 minutes of how things kind of play out. Very excited to hear you all's thoughts of this latest episode of Perry Mason. So as I normally do, like I said, I do the recaps, but just initial thoughts. Again, episode 3, 4, and 5 have really shaped into a really well done show. It is a slow burn, but we're now diving deeper into Perry Mason. You know, characters like Della, characters like EB, who we're going to talk about here in a bit, and then it's starting to unfold a little bit more of what's going on with the church and seeing the division, kind of the civil war that's going on between Sister Alice and the elders. So a lot of the pieces are starting to come together, and it's becoming more and more intriguing. I still think last week's episode was my favorite, but this episode definitely kind of opens up things in a new way and definitely gives the fans of the old Perry Mason something to really appreciate by him becoming a lawyer. And we're going to talk about that and how that was handled. But let's just recap the episode. So the episode starts off with Della. As I had mentioned in my review last week, I assumed that Della was going to be the one to, I thought, save EB, but boy, was I wrong. She does come to EB's house, but unfortunately it's too late. EB has killed himself. You know, we see Della clearly upset and very shocked by that findings of EB being dead, and she immediately not calls the police, but she calls Perry Mason instead, and we see them kind of play out, the scene play out where they're, picking up EB, taking him to his room and making it look like it was just he died of natural causes, which I don't know if there'll be more findings on that in regards to his autopsy and seeing that it was, suicide, but I don't know if that's the storyline they're going to even dive into. But we see that, obviously they're both just shaken by this news, and, again, the idea of them making it seem like a natural death is to kind of help, the situation not be as, publicized as it could be, showing that he committed suicide, maybe affecting Emily's case, that he knew something, that she was guilty, and maybe that was why he killed himself. And you know how the media can spin and twist into a story. So, morally speaking, it's not maybe the best thing to do, but I think, for this story, it was probably the best thing to do for these characters, as we get a really nice, interesting line that I liked by Perry Mason in this episode. So within the first 5 minutes, like I said, let me know how you guys felt about EB and how he was handled. Again, I thought that Della was going to maybe save him, and maybe he was going to retire from being a lawyer, kind of get his thoughts together, kind of get his financial situation together. But bye-bye to EB and John Lithgow, who's a fantastic actor. I really enjoyed his character as EB, so rest in peace to EB, guys. But let me know how you all thought about that opening scene. We see, Sister Alice has gotten both supporters of her, supporting Emily Dodson and making Charlie rise in resurrection. We're less than 60-something days from Easter Sunday, where that's the date that she said that she's going to have him be brought back to life. But then she also has her haters, as we know from last week, from the little girl with the box of snakes and everyone that's kind of, not on Sister Alice's side. So we're seeing this kind of, again, this division between the elders and their followings and Sister Alice and her people that believe in her. So that's, something that we'll definitely dive into a little bit later. But we do see within this moment of this opening scene here, Emily's passionate again, or not Emily, but Sister Alice, and she's passionate again. She wants to speak her sermon. She wants to get this $25,000 for Emily's bond. And we see in this scene that she tells her mother, you better do what I say, get in line, or I can relieve you of her duty. So that was the first time we've really seen Sister Alice kind of push back to her mother, which we haven't seen so far this season. So really interesting moment there. We meet Bryson, who was EB's son, and you see him at the funeral, which, by the way, that actor, I don't know if he just talks like that naturally or if it was in his role to sound just like his dad, EB, because he sounds just like John Lithgow. Like, again, I don't know if that was a show thing, if that's how the actor talks naturally. I think it was probably a show thing, but his not his accent, but the way he was, talking sound just like EB. But, we see that. But there is no lost love between the son and his dad. You can just tell that Bryson was not a fan of his dad. They didn't really speak about each other. He didn't really seem to care that his dad had died. So that was a really interesting moment. But a really interesting moment because in that moment, this is where we see Perry maybe thinking about his relationship with his son Teddy, and kind of leads into a next couple scenes here. But before we get to this family reunion, we see a particular line that I really took away from this episode. It's a really cool quote to me from Perry Mason, because I know, again, for those fans of the novels and the short stories and the television series back in the day, I know that he had a lot of one-liners and these really good lines. And this line to me really kind of stood out to me, where he's talking to Della about EB dying and how they handled the situation, where instead of her looking like a suicide, again, it was due to more natural causes and helps to insurance and all that different stuff. But he says a line where it's not knowing what's legal but what's right, and that just to me really kind of defines Perry Mason's character. Again, going back to my very first episode review, I haven't seen any episodes of Perry Mason, haven't seen a movie, haven't read a book, haven't done any prior knowledge to this character. So to me, that seemed like a very Perry Mason line to say, and kind of really shapes that character and kind of blurring the lines of what's legal, what's morally right versus what's, things of that nature regarding helping the people that need to be helped. So I really like that line. And that line to me really solidifies this version of Perry Mason. So what I've been reading in the comments for those that have been fans of the show back in the day, that line really stood out to me personally. Let me know what you all thought about that line. But again, a really good moment in the show, because we're seeing Della, talk about how she met EB, and she's 25 years old, disowned from her family. Just again, a nice quieter moment for the characters, help build the character development, and it shows us that relationship that was built between Della, EB, as well as Perry Mason. So then we transition to a scene I was really looking forward to for a very long time. As I had mentioned before, I would like to see Linda and I would like to see Teddy, and we get that moment again after coming from EB's funeral and seeing his relationship between EB and Bryson. This kind of encourages Mason to see his son, because as we've seen in the previous episodes, he's calling him on the phone, but he seems to be missing birthdays, holidays, really doesn't seem to be in his son's life that much, due to not loving his son, but just due to the fact that he's consumed with his work, especially this Dodson case. So we see they visit his son, they have a moment, they embrace each other, but within this scene, too, we see him interacting with, I'm not sure who that other woman was, Carol, I think her name was. I'm not sure if that's Linda's mom, if that's just a housekeeper. I'm not sure what the relationship dynamic is. And we meet this character, I believe his name was Ed. Again, I don't know if Ed was the stepdad of Emily, or her real dad. He looked a little young. I don't know if that's, Linda's new husband, and, Teddy, that's his stepdad, because they seem to have a really father-son relationship. So I'm not too sure. Let me know in the comments of who Ed was, who that lady was. If that's, again, Linda's mother, Perry's ex-mother-in-law, if that's Teddy's grandmother, I'm not sure who those two characters were, but, we meet them, and I'm not sure if they'll play a pivotal role into the rest of the season, but nice to meet some new characters. So we catch up with Drake. We didn't see Drake last week, but we catch up with Drake. We see him and his wife is at church, and we see this continuation of this kind of rift, and not necessarily in a relationship, but definitely a rift in their beliefs in regarding how Drake wants to speak about the miswrongs, the misdoings of some of the police officers that he worked with, like Ennis and Holcomb, and his wife wants to, and I can see both sides of the fence, but his wife wants him to stay quiet because, again, these are the 30s. He's a black man working in the police department in LA. So she wants him to kind of keep quiet, keep the peace before you lose your job, or maybe even worse. So I can see both of their positions, but we kind of catch up with him. We see, his wife having an interaction with some other people from the church. And again, the sermon within that they went to in the church really kind of sparked this kind of tension between the two. But we get more of them later in this episode. And I think they're coming to amends, and their rift is kind of becoming more of an agreement between the two, Drake and his wife. So We see Emily has a new lawyer. It's Frank C. Dodson, I believe his last name was. He's assigned by the courts, which doesn't seem to be a good fit. And we'll talk about Frank in a bit here. But as we kind of continue with the episode, Della visits, I believe his name was Leslie. And she tries to convince him to be on as a lawyer. But he tells her flat out, this is a suicide job. This is a career loser. This is a lose-lose situation for anyone that's going to represent her. So as the seeds have been planting that there is a lawyer out there, or a soon-to-be lawyer, that's going to take the case, and we'll talk about that here in a bit. But we see that, Barnes really has a handle on this case and really wants to take that next career step to being the mayor of LA and things of that nature. So, but we find out in that moment that Emily is not looking good for Emily in regards to someone stepping up to be her lawyer, because this Frank guy is not seeming to be a really good lawyer. But as we kind of move forward, we see another scene between Drake and his wife. They're at a beach. We see Drake talking to one of his friends. His friends tells him about this job, about being a truck driver. Drake's like, no, that's really not for me. I want to continue to be a cop no matter what level of the department I'm at. And we see a moment again. This is a very important moment for me, because this is the show maybe alluding to foreshadowing with Drake and his family, maybe not having a good, happy ending for the show. We seen it a couple episodes ago where Ines is rubbing her belly. We see in this episode, they're embracing their kid. I believe her name was Lucy. It's going to be a girl. And I don't know. I think this show is pointing towards Drake, his wife either losing a child due to some incident, or maybe being pushed down and having a miscarriage, or maybe being shot by somebody, and either it playing out being that the cops did it, someone did it that's not a cop, but the cops aren't going to stand up for Drake and his family. So I see something. Unfortunately, I hope that I'm wrong, but I see something tragically happen with Lucy and his wife, Drake's wife, or both of them, or one of them. I don't see things playing out well for those characters. Let me know if you guys are feeling the same thing, but I think what it's going to boil down to is Drake is not going to want to be a police officer anymore due to whatever I think will happen to the baby, his wife, or both of them. So let me know what you all think about that. We get a very interesting scene between Pete and Ines. Seamlessly, Pete throwing his partner under the bus, kind of playing both sides of the fence, which I thought was very interesting. We get another moment between Drake and his wife, and this is where they kind of make amends and kind of get on the same page, which we really haven't seen thus far between the first two episodes that we've seen them as a couple. So it's nice to see that his wife is now getting on board with him being a police officer and trying to do the right thing. But again, I don't think that relationship, or at least them as a couple, I don't think it's going to end well. I think something's going to unfortunately happen to, again, either the baby, her, or both of them. But again, we'll see. I completely hope I'm wrong. But this show has a very dark nature, so we'll see what happens with babies in this show. So we get more of that division between the church and Allison. Again, the elders really want her to be dethroned from her position and not be the forefront, the face of the church. And the stuff with the church, for me, some of it works. I like Sister Alice and her mother's relationship and just the dynamic between the elders and her. But sometimes some of that stuff is just, HBO has put in a lot of production in the church scenes, from the choir to the people in the audience to just everything. The scene plays out where the guy's in the wheelchair. She makes, he walks for 2 seconds and everyone is, the crowd goes wild when they see Sister Alice does that. But again, like I said, some of the stuff with the church is very intriguing, but then some of the other stuff doesn't feel as developed and feels kind of rushed at times. But let me know what you all are thinking about this church stuff. But in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking to myself, Sister Alice, you need to calm down before you have another seizure. But we'll see what comes of that. But we see Della listens to a call, and this is where she finds out that indeed that Frank was assigned to this case and is working with Barnes and is trying to get the evidence for, he can obviously give the evidence to them so they can, destroy them, their stance in the trial. We see a very interesting moment between Sister Alice and Emily visiting the grave of Charlie, which she asks Sister Alice, hey, do you need to unbury Charlie for the resurrection? Which I'm thinking, this is not a good idea to put all this in her head at the kind of the mental state that Emily's in, but we'll see what happens there. Mason is confronted by Frank, or he confronts Frank and kind of tells him he's a bad lawyer. He needs to just get out of the situation. A very interesting scene, to say the least. I wasn't too fond of that scene. I don't know, the performance between just the chemistry between those two didn't really play well to me. That scene kind of fell flat, but it was, Perry just essentially telling Mason, or telling Frank, that he's a terrible lawyer. He needs to get out of here ASAP. And then the moment that a lot of you all that are big fans of Perry Mason, as you all have predicted, Perry is now being put in a position to be Emily's lawyer. Again, from all the other iterations of Perry, he's normally, from what I was gathered, from the comments and seeing some old pictures of Perry Mason from the back in the day in the books and novels and all that stuff, he is a lawyer in the show, and now he's becoming a lawyer in this iteration. So he's being put in the position to defend Emily, because there is no lawyers in town that wants to represent her. I'm really, personally speaking, I'm not sure how I feel how the show is handling the position of putting Perry to be a lawyer. I felt like it was very rushed. Again, I knew it was inevitable. It was going to happen based on the true nature of Perry Mason. But I felt like them presenting that and how they handled it within the last 10 minutes of the show just felt extremely rushed, in my opinion. It didn't feel earned. Again, I knew it was going to happen, but I don't like the way it was handled. But I would love to know what you all think about that and how they handled it. But as we wrap up the episode, we see Hamilton Berger, who, again, for all those Perry Mason fans, I'm pretty sure he's a pivotal character in the show, in the novels, or whatever the case may be. But he's brought in to help Perry Mason pass the bar. He wants to take Barnes' position, so there's that kind of conflict, giving you a reason why he's helping him for free. But as we wrap up the episode, we see Perry Mason has become a lawyer now. He passed the bar, and all within 10 minutes, he goes from being a private detective to a lawyer in 10 minutes. So again, I'm not the biggest fan of how they handled that. Again, I knew it was going to happen inevitably just due to the nature of the character, but I just felt like the show could have dove deeper. And also the way they handled EB, I personally would have preferred if EB was saved, or if he was beaten badly by Ennis and he was in a coma for the rest of the episodes of the season. That's why he wasn't able to represent Emily. I'm not too sure how I feel about how they handle EB's death, and that being the propelling Mason to be the lawyer, and also the way that Mason becomes a lawyer within 10 minutes. He passes the bar within 2 weeks. He sits down, has a tea with this gentleman, Hamilton Berger, and now is a lawyer. So I knew it was going to happen, but I personally am not a fan of how it was handled. But again, let me know what you all think about how Perry Mason becoming a lawyer was handled in episode 5, again, in the last 10 minutes of the episode. So again, I thought this was a solid episode. We don't really touch too much on who is the killer, learning more about that. We didn't get any Baggerly stuff. We get some stuff with Drake. But again, I think things are going to unfortunately end tragically. Hope that I'm wrong, but I don't see things ending well for Lucy and that baby, or the baby, and Drake's wife. But it'll be really interesting to see Perry in those court scenes, because I know, again, for you diehard fans, those are the moments that you live for, seeing Perry in the trial, in court, speaking that lingo, and having all the Perry Mason isms that you guys love from the previous iterations of this character. So let me know what you thought of this episode. As always, like, share, comment, subscribe. A lot of great stuff over this past weekend, from Fatal Affair review. I had a review for other things on Netflix this past weekend, such as Curse. I did a watch along for Inception, celebrate its 10-year anniversary, and a lot of awesome things coming for you all this week, including a Q&A, Ask Me Anything, this coming Saturday, 3 p.m. Central Time. So I hope you all can join the conversation. But hope you all have a great week. See you in the next video.